I'm Truman, and welcome to my new show, Book Lovers Anonymous. This is a show for all of you out there who still appreciate the written word and can be bothered to pick up one of these once in a while. I'll be doing book reviews, book recommendations, and giving the occasional rant on why reading a book on Amazon's Kindle or Barnes & Noble's Nook is the same as going into a restaurant, spitting in someone's face, grabbing them by the shoulders, and telling them that they look like the backside of a donkey. Seeing as this is my first review, I better explain how I sort the books that I review out into 5 categories. Number 1. Genre porn. Genre porn is the sort of book that follows a very predictable plotline but is enjoyable because it's crammed full of action, mystery, adventure, or romance. Genre porn makes for very quick, enjoyable reading with a satisfying if a bit predictable conclusion, much like when one is watching regular porn, hence the name. Not that I would know that from experience, or anything. Number 2. Literature. Literature, in my book, is subdivided into 2 subcategories. 1. Classical literature, and 2. Topical literature. Classical literature is stuff like Shakespeare, the Bible, Wuthering Heights, that sort of thing. There is always going to be at least one important work of classical literature that you have not read, and there will be some person out in the world homing in on you like a missile from a predator drone, just waiting to tell you how big of a Philistine cockroach you are for not having read some obscure Persian poem from the 9th century. It makes you look like an idiot. It's going to happen. That's life. The second sort of literature is topical literature, which is stuff like history books, textbooks, how-to guides, things like that. Most people find this incredibly boring, but I like it, being the sad little nerd that I am. Number 3. Plain old good books. Not old enough or respectable enough to be considered literature, plain old good books are well-written books that are more satisfying to read than genre porn, if a bit harder to get through. Constructed with complex and original storylines, detailed and interesting characters, and vivid settings, reading these books is a bit like eating your grandma's cookies or some other dish that you equally hold in high esteem. They're not fancy, but they're delicious and heartwarming nonetheless. Number 4. Bestsellers. I have a big pet peeve with bestsellers. Most of the time, these are books that are very marketable, but really rarely have any quality or substance to them. It's like genre porn on steroids. Really, that's all. Occasionally a decent book makes it on the bestseller list, but that is the exception to the rule. Number 5. Miscellanea. This category is the leper colony of the other categories, the ones that just don't fit anywhere else go here. I won't be using this category much, but it's nice to have it as a backup, as a last resort. So there are my categories, and now we can move on to my first review, that of Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. Written in the 1920s, when Miss Cather was staying at the La Fonda Inn in Santa Fe, New Mexico, this piecemeal of fiction and non-fiction is set in 19th century New Mexico and is told from the perspective of a French missionary bishop, Jean-Marie Latour, and his childhood friend and vicar, Joseph Valiant. This book is rich with imagery of New Mexico, so rich that when one actually visits New Mexico, one can't help but be disappointed. Just listen to some of these descriptions. This plain might once have been an enormous city, all the smaller quarters destroyed by time, only the public buildings left, piles of architecture that were like mountains. The sandy soil of the plain had a light sprinkling of junipers, and was splotched with masses of blooming rabbit brush, that olive-colored plant that grows in high waves like a tossing sea, at this season covered with a thatch of bloom, yellow or gorse, or orange like marigolds. One thing which struck him at once was that every mesa was duplicated by a cloud mesa, like a reflection which lay motionless above it or moved slowly up from behind it. These cloud formations seemed to always be there, however hot and blue the sky. Sometimes they were flat terraces, ledges of vapor. Sometimes they were dome-shaped or fantastic, like the tops of silvery pagodas, rising one above the other, as if an oriental city lay directly behind the rock. Wonderful descriptions like that are found throughout this book. This is also a very theological book, focusing very much on biblical references and the Catholic theme that permeates the whole thing. It also draws a lot on the comparison between the simple paganism of the Indians, which is described as childlike by Willa Cather, and the complex dogma of the Catholic Church, and the marriage of the two that happens in the Pueblo churches. If you like anything about the Southwest, or about French people, or, I don't know, Indians, or any element of New Mexico, with the exception of Roswell, you will love this book as I loved this book. This is one of my favorite books, and I have read it at least 30 times. I wish I was kidding because it makes me out to be such a massive nerd, but I love this book. I'll probably read it another 100 times before I die. So that's my show. I hope you enjoyed it, and please tune in next week when I do a more in-depth review of the Da Vinci Code and when I tell you that all of Dan Brown's other books are much better. I'm Truman, your literary critic, and I refuse to have a catchphrase. P.S. Okay, before you say it, I know some of you are going to post it. He sounds really feminine. Yes, I know, I'm gay. I'm going to sound feminine. I'm probably one of the few people who could win a female with the itty on the end, contest with Justin Bieber. I know this. No need to tell me anymore. Bye!